The jungle moon of Calyx 9 was loud, too loud, for a planet supposedly uninhabited by intelligent life. Somewhere beyond the camouflaged dome, something massive let out a low, gurgling growl that made the reinforced glass tremble. 27 cadets from across the Galactic Interspecies Academy stiffened. "Stay calm," barked Instructor Krivek, pacing the center of the observation dome with claws clacking against the metal floor. "Do not move, do not breathe too fast, and above all, do not fear. The Ultharex can smell it." The tension was thick enough to bend gravity. Every species there, some with scales, others with gills, one with actual exposed brain folds focused on slowing their hearts, regulating their breathing, hiding any sign of panic. All except for the human in the back. Daniel was sitting cross-legged, quietly munching on a ration bar that suspiciously smelled like burnt plastic and raisins. He raised a hand. "Sorry, just to clarify, smell fear? Like, literally? Or is this more of a face your demons motivational speech kind of thing?" Every head turned. Instructor Krivek stopped dead in his tracks, slowly rotating his neck in a way that cracked loudly and probably wasn't medically advisable. "I am not joking, cadet." "Right, but smell fear? Like a dog? That's a real thing? You're not just saying that to keep people calm?" The instructor's 4 pupils narrowed. "It detects the pheromones released during panic. The Ultharex finds the scent offensive, irritating. It has mauled lesser beings for sweating incorrectly." Daniel blinked. "Huh." Then he shrugged and took another bite of the ration bar. "Okay, sure." And just like that, while every other cadet fought to suppress instinctual terror, Daniel simply didn't bother, because he genuinely didn't believe it was real. 12 hours earlier, the dropship carrying the cadets had screamed through Calyx 9's upper atmosphere like a migraine in motion. The seats were built for Norcathi bulk, so Daniel had spent the descent rattling between armrests like a pinball. Opposite him, a creature that looked like a 6-foot otter covered in emerald moss was silently vibrating. Daniel leaned forward. "You nervous? Or is that your version of excitement?" The creature flicked one of its ears and replied in a calm monotone, "My kind metabolizes cortisol through dermal micro-shivers." "You?" "Me?" Daniel grinned. "I took a nap." Instructor Krivek hadn't even given them time to set foot on soil before launching into his usual storm of warnings. Calyx 9, he explained, was an apex predator ecosystem where even the plants had carnivorous tendencies. The first rule was silence, the second was stillness, the third was fear management. "None of you are special," he had growled as the cadets filed into the dome. "Your anatomy, your technology, your weapons, none of it matters if you lose control of your biosigns." Daniel had raised his hand again during that briefing. "Serious question. How do you lose control of a biosign? I didn't bring mine with a remote." The instructor's jaw twitched. Even now, hours later in the dense jungle heat, the words echoed. Inside the observation dome, time passed slowly. The cadets were assigned sectors to watch through the clear steel windows. The sensors tracked movement, heat, pressure, anything that might alert them to approaching wildlife, or worse. The air was thick with tension. Not from temperature or humidity, though those weren't helping, but from the awareness that one wrong breath could be a biological insult to a predator the size of a small shuttle. Krivek stood at the central control table, scanning field reports from the scout drones. "There's motion near Sector C6, he said. "Prepare for observation." A soft chime echoed through the dome, followed by a synchronized inhale from every cadet. Daniel squinted through the viewport. Far ahead, something was moving through the tall crimson grass. "Movement appears quadrupedal," reported a Yadari cadet near the front, her translucent skin already mottled from stress. "Large. Perhaps 1,200 kilos?" "No vocalizations yet," said a second voice. Then, from just beyond the edge of the clearing, a shape emerged. It was bulky, low to the ground, with broad tusks and a fur pattern that shimmered like oil in sunlight. The Ultharex cub, not even full-grown, was still the size of a hover cycle. It walked with a lumbering confidence, sniffing the air with slow deliberation. Several cadets instinctively leaned away from the window. One emitted a low-frequency whimper, immediately followed by a sharp slap of his own tentacle across his mouth. The Ultharex stopped. It turned its broad snout to the dome and lifted its head. And sniffed. Every cadet froze. For a moment, all you could hear was the steady hum of the climate regulators inside the dome and the barely contained panic in the sudden stillness. Then, as if struck by an invisible current, the Ultharex recoiled. It grunted and veered away from the majority of the dome's viewport, favoring a wide arc that gave several meters clearance. A collective exhale rippled through the cadets. Instructor Krivek's eyes narrowed. But then, the Ultharex paused. It turned and walked straight toward the west side of the dome, toward Daniel. "What?" Daniel said, mouth half full of ration bar. "What'd I do?" The cub's movements were slow, deliberate. Not aggressive. It didn't snarl or paw at the glass. It simply approached, nose twitching, eyes locked on the only being inside the dome who wasn't stiff as petrified bark. Instructor Krivek's hands went to the emergency alert console. "Prepare countermeasures," he ordered. "Drones on standby. If it breaches—" "I didn't do anything," Daniel said, backing slightly, but still more curious than scared. The Ultharex stepped up to the reinforced glass. Its breath fogged the surface. One heavy paw thudded against the soil. It stared at Daniel with unsettling intensity. Daniel stared back. "I feel like I'm being guilt-tripped by a shag carpet," he muttered. The cub let out a low huff. Then it turned, slowly circling the dome until it reached the rear hatch. A moment later, the proximity alert lit up. "What?" Krivek hissed, eyes flicking over the console. "That shouldn't be possible. The hatch has a scent seal." The lock disengaged. Everyone turned. Daniel was already walking to the back of the dome. "Wait," Krivek barked. "Do not engage." "I didn't touch anything," Daniel snapped. "I just stood up." The hatch opened. The jungle air hit them like a wave, hot, damp, and filled with the scent of things that didn't like being smelled. And there, right outside the open hatch, was the Ultharex cub. It didn't charge. It didn't growl. It just walked in. Instructor Krivek froze. Everyone remained motionless. Do not react, do not speak. The cadets locked up, barely daring to blink. The cub walked past them all, ignoring every single one. It didn't so much as glance at the shivering Yadari or the Kaloth cadet who had gone completely translucent from fear. Instead, it went straight to Daniel. It stopped, sniffed. Then, with a long sigh that vibrated the floor, it slumped down beside him. Its flank pressed against Daniel's leg like a lazy dog looking for a nap. And then it burped. A sound like a garbage disposal digesting soup echoed through the dome. No one moved. Instructor Krivek's face had gone slack. One of his pupils twitched. Daniel gently peeled the ration bar wrapper off his boot. "So, I guess that means it likes me?" Krivek slowly pressed a series of commands into the console. Outside, a fleet of drones launched from hidden compartments in the trees, deploying synthetic prey scent in all directions. The cub stirred. It snorted. It stood. It gave Daniel one last sniff, then turned and trotted out of the dome. Silence. Then, the emergency lockdown protocols re-engaged, sealing the hatch behind it. Every cadet turned toward Daniel. Daniel looked around. Okay, was that part of the simulation, or am I about to get eaten in some next-level hazing ritual? Krivek approached, eyes scanning Daniel from head to toe like he was a bomb with its timer stuck on one. "You stayed calm, completely calm. How did you suppress your fear response so thoroughly?" "I didn't," Daniel said, brushing Ultharex fur off his pants. "I just didn't believe it." "You what?" "I mean, come on, smells fear? That sounds like something from a bad action movie. I thought you were doing, like, an intimidation drill." Krivek's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Daniel squinted at the window where the Ultharex had vanished into the trees. "Wait, you were serious?" Krivek didn't respond. Daniel slowly nodded. "Huh, so that thing really can smell fear?" No answer. "Well, that explains it. Y'all reeked of anxiety cologne." Krivek turned to the console and began typing furiously. Inside the dome, one cadet finally whispered, "He controls his fear better than our warrior caste." "No," another corrected. "He just didn't think it was real. That's worse." From the console, Krivek muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like, "Humans are broken." No one spoke for the first several minutes after the Ultharex cub left. Instructor Krivek remained at the control console, posture rigid, fingers dancing silently across the keys as he rewound the security feed. Multiple drones were still tracking the cub's retreat through the trees, but Krivek barely glanced at them. Instead, he zoomed in on Daniel. Frame by frame, he watched the human's expression as the cub approached, sniffed, and slumped down beside him like it was settling in for story time. He scanned thermal overlays, vitals, readouts, biosignal charts, all automatically recorded by the dome's internal systems. He froze the playback on one screen. Daniel's face, wide-eyed but calm, pupils responsive, pulse elevated but not erratic. Krivek's manned, his jaw tightened. "This isn't normal," he muttered. Daniel had returned to his perch near the back, this time with a water pack and a small group of bewildered cadets watching him like he'd sprouted extra limbs. "Is it always like that for you?" asked Ularesh, a crystalline reptilian with spines that shifted colors depending on emotional state. She was currently a flickering chartreuse confusion, laced with deep anxiety. Daniel shrugged. "No idea. First time I've met a prehistoric land beast that hates sweat." "It sat next to you," another cadet said quietly, the moss-furred otter like one Daniel had spoken to on the shuttle. "It bypassed 19 other species, some of us bred for silent movement and scent suppression, and it sat next to you." "To be fair," Daniel said, pointing to his ration bar, "this might have smelled like its favorite uncle. Tasted like burnt socks, though." Someone across the dome let out a very tense, very confused cough-laugh hybrid. Krivek straightened. "Cadet Daniel, with me." The medical bay attached to the dome was compact, but fully equipped for field diagnostics. As the scanners powered up, Daniel sat on the exam platform, idly kicking his feet like he was waiting for a dentist. Krivek hovered beside the attending med officer, a moth-like Solarian with compound eyes that clicked softly as she scrolled through the readings. "I don't understand," she said after a full bioscan. His adrenal response peaked. He did react physiologically to the predator, but there's no corresponding neurochemical shift. Krivek frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the adrenaline spiked appropriately, heart rate increased, pupils dilated, but the typical fear markers aren't here. No cortisol surge, no noradrenaline, no pheromone emissions. His sweat composition remained stable, no fear signature whatsoever." "So, what did spike the adrenaline?" Krivek asked. The Solarian tilted her head. "Probably excitement, curiosity maybe. There's brainwave activity in the exploratory regions, not survival-based." He wasn't thinking of danger. Daniel lifted a finger. "In my defense, you really sold it like a team-building thing. I mean, smell fear sounded like a warning against overreacting. I assumed you were trying to toughen us up." Krivek stared at him. "You assumed I was lying." "I assumed you were exaggerating," Daniel said, crossing his arms. "Or quoting a movie. You know, to spook us. Like, face your fears, embrace the challenge, that kind of thing." Krivek blinked. All 4 eyelids. The Solarian gave a dry hum. "I've never seen anything like this. The adrenaline was real. His fight-or-flight system was prepped, but his brain didn't interpret the threat as real fear." Daniel looked over. "So, wait, are you saying I'm fearless?" "No," she said, voice flat. "I'm saying your psychological filter decided the predator didn't count." Daniel considered that, then gave a lopsided smile. "Neat." Krivek gestured sharply. "We'll need a full psych profile uploaded to the Academy core, and flag this for the Xenopsych team, include his hormone isolation levels." The Solarian nodded, already tapping notes onto her wristpad. Daniel raised a brow. "Should I be worried I'm about to get dissected?" Krivek ignored him. "You'll return to observation once the scan logs are submitted, but until then, you are not to leave this dome unescorted. Is that understood?" Daniel gave a lazy 2-fingered salute. "Understood, boss." Back in the main dome, the cadets were no longer watching the trees, they were watching Daniel. He'd only been gone 30 minutes, but the way they tracked him now was different. Warier. As if his ability to walk away from a predator encounter without screaming had elevated him into a separate species entirely. "Do humans train for this?" one cadet whispered. He didn't train, said another. He denied the premise of danger. That's not training, that's delusion. He must be part of a specialist subspecies, said the translucent skin Yadari, still visibly rattled. Maybe bred for biochemical resilience. My people have entire monasteries dedicated to fear, suppression, and none of them could have pulled that off. Daniel had found a seat again, ignoring the stares. He pulled out a field tablet and scrolled casually through the Academy's wildlife database, flipping through notes on the Ultharex. Says here their olfactory system is 20 times more sensitive than most mammals. Explains the burp, I guess. Krivek re-entered the dome and crossed to the front platform. Attention. Until further notice, this training operation is under review. Will remain in observation mode, but no unsupervised outings. Groans followed, especially from cadets who had anticipated hands-on field time. Krivek silenced them with a single glare. He tapped the holographic display. A freeze frame of Daniel and the cub appeared behind him. This, Krivek said, was not expected. Not even by me. He turned slowly to face the class. But it has presented us with an opportunity. The Ultharex cub rejected 19 fear pheromone signatures. It accepted one non-hostile scent, that of Cadet Daniel. Daniel raised a hand. Just checking, but do I get, like, a merit badge for this? Or am I now considered bait? Krivek did not smile. Neither. But you are now subject to ongoing physiological observation. You may have qualities relevant to predator deterrence, or attraction. That second one sounds less great, Daniel muttered. That night, the dome's interior lights dimmed automatically to simulate nightfall. Daniel lay on his cot, hands behind his head, while whispers continued around him in 6 languages. He heard his name, often, not mockingly, not admiringly either. It was as if someone had walked into a ghost story and survived by arguing the ghost didn't exist. Ularesh passed his cot as she moved toward the wash station, pausing briefly. I used to think you were careless, she said quietly. Now I think you're something worse. Daniel looked up. Worse? Unknowable. She walked off before he could reply. At 0300 standard, the perimeter motion sensors triggered. Krivek was already at the control station when Daniel arrived, pulled out of sleep by the sirens. What's going on? The instructor didn't look away from the screen. The cub is back. Daniel leaned over. Again? Why? The screen showed the Ultharex pacing the perimeter. Slowly, deliberately, it was ignoring the baited synthetic prey again. Krivek tapped the comms panel. Deploy redirect drones, keep it outside the radius. A moment later, the cub stopped and looked directly at the camera. Krivek's hand paused over the manual override. It remembers. Daniel crossed his arms. You make that sound ominous. It is not supposed to remember. These cubs operate on pure scent association. No long-term targeting behavior has ever been recorded at this stage of development. Maybe I smell like something it imprinted on. Possibly, Krivek said. Or possibly, you represent an anomaly its instincts are trying to resolve. Daniel frowned. Wait, are you saying I confused a predator into curiosity? I'm saying, Krivek said, his tone low, you may have introduced a variable into this ecosystem it has never encountered. Doubt. On the monitor, the cub yawned, sniffed the air again, then slumped down near the clearing edge. It stayed there until dawn. Watching. The next morning arrived with a tension that had nothing to do with the jungle's usual soundscape. Birds with translucent wings screamed like old machinery. Something with too many knees galloped through the canopy above, and yet none of it registered the same way as the Ultharex cub still lounging at the tree line, as if it had wandered out of a wildlife documentary and refused to leave the set. It had not moved all night. By now, the cub was being monitored by no fewer than 11 drones, 2 thermal satellites, and a makeshift behavioral analysis AI hastily patched together by Krivakadiet 0400. The AI was unreliable. Krivek's notes were not. Day 2. Cub returned to observation perimeter. No signs of aggression. Tracking human subject specifically. Suspect scent fixation. Human subject continues to lack fear-based pheromone output. Data suggests anomaly is repeatable. Krivek closed the log and stared at Daniel from across the dome. The human was stretching, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and drinking something that reeked of synthetic caffeine and childhood trauma. "You're not concerned?" Krivek finally asked. Daniel lowered the cup. "About what?" "The apex predator camping outside our dome like it's waiting for a school bus." Daniel walked to the window and looked out. The cub, sensing movement, perked up its ears, its massive head tilted. Then it lay back down, tail thumping once like a casual greeting. Daniel waved. "Okay, yeah, that's a bit weird." Krivek didn't respond. He was already filing another update. The dome's schedule had been altered. There were no more outdoor expeditions, no drills, and certainly no field assignments. Instead, the cadets were subjected to extended xenobehavior lectures while the instructors tried to make sense of what was happening. One such lecture, led by an amphibious taroxybiologist, focused on predator bonding phenomena. She paced beside a flickering hollow of the Ultharex's brain anatomy. "There is no established precedent for cross-species imprinting in Ultharex cubs," she explained. "Not even in captivity. They reject most stimuli unless raised from infancy alongside them. And even then, the adult phase resets all behavioral ties." "So, what's different now?" asked Ularesh from the back row, spines fluctuating through hues of blue and gray. The biologist glanced toward Daniel. "We think it's not attraction, but absence, a null signal. You all emitted some form of stress signature. He," she pointed, "did not. To the cub, that may be less about affinity and more about silence. An unnatural silence in the predator's language." Daniel raised a hand. "So basically, I'm the emotional version of static noise?" "In lay terms, yes." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Weirdly okay with that." Krivek, standing in the shadows near the back, didn't look okay with anything. By midday, a plan had been devised. A controlled experiment. The goal: confirm that the cub's behavior could be reliably tied to Daniel's presence. They would send Daniel voluntarily into the open perimeter. "Let me get this straight," Daniel said, standing next to the airlock as Krivek adjusted the collar of his monitoring vest. "You want me to walk up to the predator?" "Again." "It is not an order," Krivek said, glancing at the security drone hovering above. "But it is valuable." Daniel eyed him. "You're not worried I'll get mauled?" Krivek hesitated. "Statistically, yes. Personally, also yes. But your vitals remain unique. The cub has not displayed aggression toward you. This will confirm or disprove any hypothesis of imprinting or scent-based fixation." "Translation," Daniel muttered. "Send the human to poke the sleeping bear. See what happens." He walked to the hatch. The cub stood up. Every cadet and instructor in the dome watched through the reinforced windows. Daniel stepped beyond the dome's scent-shielding radius, boots crunching on the dry moss that covered most of the clearing. The cub didn't charge. It waited. Daniel paused 10 meters away. The cub chuffed a low, wheezing exhale. Daniel crouched, slowly. "Hey, big guy," he said, feeling more ridiculous with every word. "So, you remember me?" The cub sniffed. Walked forward. Everyone in the dome froze. Daniel stayed put. The cub circled once. Its massive nose brushed his shoulder. Then, slowly, it sat again. Its tail swept out behind it, dust puffing in small clouds. Krivek's voice crackled through the comlink in Daniel's ear. "Remain still. You're within direct contact range." Daniel whispered. "So is it. You think I forgot?" The cub leaned slightly. It sniffed his hair. Then it burped again. Daniel gagged. "Okay, that's worse the second time." Inside the dome, Krivek was tracking everything: Daniel's biosigns, the cub's respiration, posture analysis from 6 different camera angles. All data pointed to one thing. The cub liked him. Or, more accurately, didn't hate him. Krivek tapped the comm again. "Can you reach forward slowly? Touch the flank?" "Touch the flank? You mean pet the prehistoric murder tank?" "Cadet." "Fine, fine." Daniel reached out, hand trembling now, not from fear, but sheer disbelief. His fingers brushed the cub's fur. It was coarse and warm. The cub let out a small, satisfied rumble. Then it flopped over onto its side, like a dog begging for a belly rub. The dome gasped in unison. Daniel blinked. "Okay, that's new." He gave the creature a cautious pat. It responded with a small tail wag. Krivek stared at the monitors in horror. This is not a defensive posture. This is submission. Is that bad? Ultharex, do not submit. Back inside, once Daniel had returned and the cub had meandered back to the tree line again, a silent argument broke out among the instructors. Krivek, the Turoxi biologist, and two remote advisors from the Academy's Xenopsych division were now locked in a data-sharing war. It's not pheromone-based, said the biologist. It can't be. Not entirely. There's behavioral imprinting here. He may have confused the cub's aggression circuitry, said one of the remote specialists, appearing as a flickering face on a monitor. Anomalous scent response, plus unique neurochemistry. It's possible the predator doesn't know how to process him. Krivek turned sharply. We are not theorizing human superiority. This is a containment risk, not a bonding success. Daniel, nearby, raised a hand. Still right here, and pretty sure I'm not superior. I cried, watching a lizard explode in a microwave once. Long story. The room went quiet. Anyway, he said, waving off the memory, if the cub's confused by me, maybe we use that, like desensitization training, or redirecting its instinct through exposure. The biologist tilted her head. You want to train an Ultharex cub? Not me, but maybe someone who doesn't smell like fierce soup to it. Krivek gave a quiet, strangled sound. It was the closest Daniel had ever seen him come to panicking. That night, the cadets gathered in the dorm wing of the dome, restlessly chattering in whispered tones. He petted it. I saw, like it was a domesticated glurm. It wagged its tail. Ultharex don't have social tails. It did with him. Daniel sat on his bunk, staring up at the ceiling. For once, he wasn't smiling. Ularesh approached cautiously. You're not sleeping? Bit hard when I've become a jungle's favorite chew toy. She hesitated. You weren't afraid. I was, Daniel said, but my body didn't think it counted. That's starting to bother me. Why? Because, if I can't process fear correctly, what happens when I should be afraid and I'm not? Ularesh blinked. For a moment, her spine shifted to a soft green. I thought you were a reckless anomaly, she said, but now I think you might be a broken one. Daniel didn't respond. Outside, the Ultharex cub lay curled at the edge of the tree line, watching, waiting, listening for the one creature in the forest who didn't scream inside. By the third morning, the cub had stopped pretending it was a coincidence. It no longer lingered near the perimeter out of idle curiosity. It waited in the open now, less like a roaming apex predator, and more like a very large, very patient dog, expecting someone to come outside and throw a stick the size of a tree trunk. No amount of synthetic prey lures, territorial noise emissions, or drone herding made it budge. It wanted Daniel, and the instructors were officially out of ways to pretend otherwise. Protocol dictates we relocate the dome, snapped one of the off-site administrators in a secure vid call with Krivek. This fixation is compromising the training environment. Krivek's jaw flexed. Relocation means breaking camp while under observation by a creature with 2-inch teeth and poor impulse control. You'll manage. You're Norkathy. I'm not concerned about myself, Krivek said, tone tight. I'm concerned about it. It's adapted to Daniel. Removing him could provoke unpredictable behavior. On a second screen, the Solarian medic nodded grimly. There's evidence of limbic bonding in the cub's neural scans. Its cortisol levels dip significantly in proximity to Daniel. This isn't just curiosity, it's emotional imprinting, primitive but real. The administrator pinched his nose. So, what's your recommendation, Instructor? Krivek paused, and said something no one expected. I think we let Daniel finish the course. The administrator blinked. You want the human to continue field survival training while under the watch of a predator that's potentially bonded to him? No, Krivek said. I want to see how far the bond goes. By midday, Daniel was standing at the dome's edge again, this time not under duress, but as part of a coordinated experiment. Let me get this straight, he said, squinting into the sunlight. You want me to leave the dome with the murder muffin and just walk around? Krivek nodded. You'll be monitored constantly. The drones are armed with tranquilizers. If it shows signs of agitation, we extract you. Agitation, Daniel muttered. Great, fantastic word. Your vitals remain stable, the Solarian added, scanning her pad. I'd like to keep it that way. Daniel took a breath and stepped out. The Ultharex stood the moment it saw him, tail twitching with what might have been anticipation or mild territorial irritation. Either way, it didn't growl, didn't charge. It padded forward, slow, deliberate, and settled beside him with a thud that shook the moss. Daniel glanced up at the drone overhead and gave a small thumbs up. Then he did something no one asked him to do. He started walking. Not toward a clearing or a drone-marked safe path. Just walking, through the jungle, past the perimeter, into the underbrush where things with fangs and multi-jointed limbs made their homes. The Ultharex followed. Inside the dome, Krivek went rigid. Track them. Keep eyes on both. Drones zipped into formation. The jungle around Daniel felt alive in a way even the dome couldn't simulate. Every breath was heavy with pollen and strange humidity. Every plant seemed to twitch slightly, and the noises were like a haunted wind chime convention. Behind him, the Ultharex cub padded along, neither protective nor predatory, just present. Daniel paused at a slope where the ground dropped toward a stream below. His boots slipped slightly, and a sharp stone gashed the side of his shin through his pants. "Ah, damn it," he hissed, staggering to the side. Blood began to soak through the fabric. In the dome, the Solarian's monitor blared an alert. Injury detected. Moderate laceration to the anterior tibial region. Adrenaline spike confirmed. "Prep extraction," Krivek ordered. But on the screen, the cub stopped too. It sniffed the air, then approached Daniel carefully, head low, ears pulled slightly back. Daniel, still crouching, held out a hand. "Hey, it's okay. Not your fault. Just a rock. Rocks are jerks." The cub rumbled deep in its chest, stepped forward, and licked the wound. The dome erupted in overlapping reactions: horror, confusion, data logging, 4 different instructors yelling, "Pause feed," at the same time. Daniel winced. "Okay, ew. But also thanks?" The cub sat, then leaned against him, gently, like a weighted blanket made of teeth. Back at the dome, Krivek refused to speak for over an hour. He simply stared at the footage, running the clip in slow motion, again and again. The Solarian, for once, was speechless. Finally, Krivek exhaled hard through his nose. The cub sensed distress and responded with comfort. "I'm logging that as a new behavior category," the Solarian said, typing quickly. "Sympathetic reaction, possibly influenced by perceived social bond." One of the alien cadets behind them muttered, "We're witnessing the jungle adopt a human." Daniel limped back to the dome 2 hours later, accompanied by a cub that might as well have been humming. The med officer immediately whisked him off to treat the gash 3 centimeters long, shallow, but bleeding enough to warrant bandaging and a tetanus spectrum booster. "You're lucky," she said, cleaning the wound. "That rock could have cracked your shin bone." "Didn't though," Daniel said, wincing. "Just a scratch. You'll need to keep weight off it for a few days, 2 minimum." Daniel frowned. "That's gonna look bad for my survival grade." "You befriended a jungle apex predator," she said flatly. "I think you'll be fine." Krivek arrived just as she finished wrapping his leg. "You walked into the jungle unprompted." "Yeah," Daniel replied. "I wanted to see if it'd follow." "And?" "It did." Krivek crossed his arms. "Why?" Daniel hesitated. "Because I had a weird thought. What if I'm not the anomaly? What if it is?" Krivek tilted his head slightly. Daniel continued, "Everyone says Ultharex are mindless killing machines. But this one's curious. Calm, observant. What if I didn't disrupt its instincts? What if I unlocked part of it no one thought was there?" Krivek didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You think you've socialized a predator?" "No," Daniel said. "I think I gave it permission to be more than one." 2 days later, the dome was dismantled. The class had officially completed their observation phase, but as cadets loaded into the transport shuttle, they all watched the tree line. The cub was there. It didn't approach, didn't chase the shuttle. It just stood, watching, silent. Daniel looked out the window as the ship lifted off, one leg resting stiffly on the seat beside him, bandaged and healing. Krivek sat across from him. "Your recovery will take another 4 days," he said, eyeing the leg. "Yep. You'll need to attend physiotherapy on return." "Sure," Krivek leaned forward. I've updated the training manual. Daniel smirked. Oh? Krivek held up a datapad and read aloud. Ultharex aversion is not to all sentient life. It's to specific hormonal outputs linked to fear pheromones. One anomaly, human cadet Daniel, lacked those outputs entirely due to an extraordinary level of disbelief. Recommend further study and a psych evaluation. Daniel grinned. You added the psych eval? Krivek's expression didn't change. It was mandatory. They sat in silence for a while as the shuttle broke atmosphere. Then Krivek said, almost to himself, "You weren't fearless." Daniel looked at him. "No, I just didn't think I should be scared. That's not bravery. That's bad instincts." Krivek looked back at the receding green orb of Calyx 9. Maybe. Or maybe it's a kind of fear we've never mapped. The kind that refuses to define danger before it arrives. Daniel shrugged. Or maybe the cub just liked my shampoo. That got a rare huff of amusement from Krivek. Back at the academy, Daniel became a topic in no fewer than 8 interspecies research papers, half speculated on human scent chemistry. The others wanted his complete emotional profile, stress thresholds, and hormone response cataloged. The medical staff gave up on understanding him when his wound healed right on schedule 5 days post-incident, just as predicted. He did all his therapy sessions. He didn't skip a single appointment. He wasn't fearless in recovery, either. He was sore. He limped. He followed instructions. And when someone asked him what it felt like to sit beside a predator that could end his life in seconds, Daniel always gave the same answer. "I don't think it wanted to hurt me. I just think it didn't know it was allowed not to." The cadets never forgot the moment the cub chose him. Some turned the story into a joke, the jungle pet adoption gone wrong. Others spoke of it with reverence, as a sign that the wild could recognize something beyond the physical. The Solarian medic, when asked in a lecture, summed it up best. Fear is instinct. Trust is learned. That cub didn't forget Daniel. It learned him. And somewhere in the dense, crimson jungle of Calyx 9, a creature with thick fur, tusks, and a permanently confused instinct